So if you're doing a $50,000 rehab, if you iron out your numbers and your estimates, you need to probably throw 15 to 20% on top of that if you want to be accurate about what it's really going to cost you. Because you're never going to anticipate every single repair needed at a property.
You would recommend every line item is accounted for, throw another 10 to 15% on that.
Easy.
All right. Today's podcast, I have my amazing guest, and his name is John Walker. He's a Pennsylvania native, right, John?
Yes.
Originally from Pittsburgh.
Born and raised.
Still lives in Pittsburgh. He lives in Oakdale, Clinton area.
Clinton.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful area out there. John, I've known since probably, we were just talking about this, probably 2000, maybe even 1999, to be honest with you. Maybe even 1998. Gosh, it's been a while.
25 years.
It's been a long time. Yeah. And the first interaction I had with you was I borrowed money from, you had started a business in hard money lending.
Correct.
And that was with Spence Hirschberger, Wade Timerson, and somebody else.
Yeah, Kathy Ferretti.
And that was kind of a cool, to me, that was new. I don't know, hard money was like a new thing, or it was new to me. But it was probably been around for a long time.
Yeah, Tom Wagner was probably the first hard money lender that I knew of in Western PA.
And now it's like, it's everywhere.
Everybody's doing
everywhere. Yeah. So John went to high school, graduated 83, went to illustrious, well-known CCAC, got his business management degree. I went to CCAC too, buddy.
Awesome.
I got a 2-year degree in automotive technology. That's what I was. I was a mechanic. That was called automotive technology.
Wow. Well, now you're the mechanic of real estate.
I do. I fix houses, and I'm more of a fireman because I'm putting out fires all day. That's what I do. That's what you do in real estate.
Biggest part of it.
Work history. This is a question I always ask my guests. Where'd you start? So at 6, he started sweeping basements for his neighbor. That was his first exposure to entrepreneurship. I don't think that's entrepreneurship. I think that there are laws against that, actually. But that's fine. At age 10, he started picking up goods for neighbors and relatives from stores for cash. Now you're getting into entrepreneurship. At age 12, began cutting grass, snow removal, even yard cleanup. So from day one, you weren't a person that was not afraid to work.
Never. And I was always the kid that always had money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
If we were playing and one of the neighbors stuck their head out, they all called me Johnny at that age. Johnny. I would run off and go to the store, cut the grass or whatever, and then come back and play with a few bucks in my pocket.
Nice. I like it. And from 14 to 18, he worked summer job at the city of Pittsburgh. 1 to 2 summers clearing vacant lots, cutting weeds. Last 2 summers worked at McKinley Park on their maintenance team. At age 19, he was hired at McDonald's, pays the bills. At age 20, he started working at Spinning Wheels, where he did skating and became a good skater. Probably mingle with some of the ladies there, I would assume. Okay. 87.
Some would say.
He was hired as in downtown parking garage. In 1989, he was on the Pittsburgh Board of Education for the custodial department. During the same time, he started a custodial company. So you're working as a custodian, and you started doing custodial work for yourself or other businesses.
Yes. Figured out how to refinish floors and partner.
You mean like hardwood or like commercial floors where they buff them? And
both.
Okay.
So we were actually doing the granite floors in some of the schools. We refinished those, and hardwood floors in classrooms. So learned how to do that, became pretty proficient. Thought I could make a few bucks in the evenings doing that. So a partner and myself began to do that. We did that for maybe a year. And made some money.
I had a friend of mine who did Dwayne. I don't know if you know Dwayne Kyles. Do you know Dwayne?
Doesn't ring a bell.
He had a custodial business. He was working for some businesses, cleaning offices at night. He did really well.
Some people do.
It was hard for him to find good people. And I think that wore on him, and he eventually got out of that. But I remember one company had hired him, and then the ownership of the company, changed hands, and then they wanted to get someone less expensive. And then they ended up calling him back in a year, because he just did such a good job. But There's money to be made in anything. You just, if you put,
Absolutely.
like, you could absolutely be a multi hundred millionaire by owning a custodial company,
It's true.
but just scaling is managing it, scaling is the hard part.
That's the part that separates the men from the boys.
Yeah,
Very few
absolutely.
people can do that.
Me included. It's hard to scale, but I'm still working on it. I'm not gonna never quit.
You're doing great.
I'm never gonna quit. All right. So then bought his first house, started a new job. Then you got a job at Columbia Gas meter reading, which was probably a pretty good job.
Very good
Right?
job.
Good benefits, good pay. You know, that's just a good job. And I think that's where Wade had worked too.
Yes. That's actually where we met.
That's where you guys met. And that job enabled you to make a stable income. You know, banks love that. And it allowed you to start investing in real estate. Bought your first house in 91 cash, moved in. What did you buy for cash? Where was that at?
I actually bought it off my mother's sister, my aunt. She had a house in Belsuver and she wanted to sell it. She couldn't sell it. And we talked and I told her, and would you sell me that house? She said, yeah, I'll sell it to you for $7,000 cash. So I cut her a check, $7,000, moved into it. And that's where my real estate career began.
Very cool. And you were single at the time?
Single at the time, my own house with no mortgage.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
And how old were you then?
I was 25.
25.
Yeah.
Bought another house cash the next year, rented it out. The following year, purchased another house, moved into that, rented out the first house. You basically invented the Burr method that everybody uses today.
Yes, we didn't call it method though.
Did you refinance out of these houses also?
Some of them I did. Probably my first mistake.
That's a very good point because, well, there's two ways of looking at it, right? Maybe there's more than two, but one is pay everything off and just work with cash. Just continue buying, pay it off, work with cash, work on very slim margins.
In a slow pace.
At a slow pace.
Yes.
Because you had up to, at some point, you had 35 houses. If you would have used that method and maybe waited another 5 years to accumulate 35 houses, you might have owned 35, paid off free and clear.
Right.
Instead of leveraging.
And I can tell you where I made my mistake. The interest rates were very high back then. And I'm sure you remember that as well. And we had never been exposed to low interest rates. So there was no such thing as a 3, 4, 5, even 6% interest rate on a mortgage. I'd never even heard of that. I didn't know that was even possible at that time. So all my interest rates were 10%, 9%. And it got to the point where I decided to sell off most of my rental properties because I wasn't making much, if any, money on them at all. And in the long term, you know, holding on to them for years and years and years, I didn't think that I would be able to not invest a lot more money in them in the future to keep them up, you know, to keep them going. So I made a decision in the late 90s to sell off most of my rental properties. And it actually in the long term worked out well for me.
Yeah, and that's because you used leverage to continue buying.
Correct.
Right?
And I had other businesses that were involved in real estate, as you know, the hard money business, wholesaling,
right.
Flipping properties as well as rentals.
But the reason you did that, and I'll come back to that, because you used leverage, but then you sold them so you could use that money for other things. But you used leverage. So instead of you owned that first house free and clear,
yes.
You bought the next one cash.
Yes.
So you had 2 houses free and clear.
Free and clear.
And yeah, you weren't getting rich off of them, but maybe you were making $300 per door at that time, cash flow.
Right.
That's $600. If you'd have had 30 of those at $300, that's $9,000 a month.
Had I stayed on that path
Right.
and taken my time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if I could go back in time, which we can't, I would tell myself, hey, stay on this path. Because in the long run, I would have had a bunch of paid off properties as opposed to properties with high mortgage rates.
Yeah.
Now, I would say things differ now. And if I was advising someone who's investing now, as the rates go back down, that's when you want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 3-4% interest, that's free money. You buy as much rental property as you can.
Yeah. It's insane, right? Because I refinanced my house about 4 years ago. I'm paying 2% interest.
That's unreal.
I always think, man, I should pay it off. Because I'm like, no, Do not pay that loan off. You're
No.
paying 2%, Alex.
Yeah.
Think. Okay, so instead of continuing down that path of accumulating rental properties, because you understand that it's a long term. You own 35 units and they're not paid off and they're kind of leveraged, and you have to do all the work and you're managing it. And you're at that time you were probably working either the job at the gas company or you were working your new. So you thought, well, maybe it's time to sell. I can take that liquid money and I can reinvest in something else. And in that case, that was your hard money business and your wholesaling.
Yes.
Right. So that's
Yes.
where we are now. So what transpired in the 90s then once you realized that this probably wasn't the path you wanted to take and you wanted to jump into a different business, the early 2000s?
I began to sell off my properties in parcels and pieces. And by, let's say 2007, I was probably down to just a handful of rental properties. But the good thing is it taught me how to sell properties. And that's when I became a pretty good wholesaler. And you and I worked together. I want to say probably 2000 through 2005 or 6.
Mhm.
You were my real estate agent.
Yeah, I
for
was
those
helping
years.
you and you were helping me, and we did some deals together, and yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
Very good time. Learned a lot from you and had a lot of good experiences during those years, for sure.
So now let's fast forward to today. You're flipping homes on a regular basis.
Yes.
And then you've been doing that. When did you start? I know you've probably flipped homes over the years since 2000. You probably
Yes.
flipped a home there. And when you say flip, I mean, you could, I use that term loosely, but when you bought some of these rentals, I mean, you essentially flipped it. You know, when the tenant moved out, you might have, in some cases, went in and rehabbed it and sold it.
Yes.
Some cases, maybe you sold it as an occupied rental property.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners, can you make more money by kicking your tenant out, fixing it up, selling it retail, or is it better to just sell it with a tenant in place, or does it depend?
In my opinion, it depends on the property. If it's a really nice property, it's upgraded and it's in good condition and you're getting high rent, then you sell it with the tenant, the property becomes more valuable. If it's a distressed property and needs work, you're better off to sell it without the tenant because chances are it's probably under rented, under market value, which pulls down the actual value of the property.
Right. That's exactly what I tell a lot of my owners at Mace. Like, I want to sell the property. It's a property that's probably worth about 200,000 if we put about 30 into it.
Right.
But with that current tenant in place and the current rent, it's only worth about 115.
Exactly.
So you're leaving some equity on the table, maybe 30 or 40 or $50,000. And then I let them make the decision.
It makes sense.
You know, because what I did was also like you did is, I continued growing my portfolio. I started in 93 when I bought my first place. It was like a duplex, I think. Man, I was up to so many units at one point and I was over leveraged and I was losing money. Then I had to scale back.
Right.
And then I had to I have a hard head. So I just did not give up and I just kept, growing the portfolio. And that's what it is. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yes.
But as I got to that point along the way, I've had to sell some really good rental properties that I would never have sold. But at the time, if I didn't sell it, I wasn't going to be able to make a mortgage payment or pay taxes on something.
Right.
So I had to sell a lot of good properties to keep the crappy ones, if that makes any sense.
Makes sense.
Because I was over leveraged on some crappy ones and I had maybe 30,000 equity in a nice duplex up here on Ramsey Avenue. Had to sell Ramsey to keep the piece of garbage down on Wabash Street.
And I think we all went through that sort of dance in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But it taught us
absolutely
how to exist in the real estate business.
So when you see young people, even not even young, just new investors, right? It's funny because you probably see the same thing I do. And I can just look at them and say, I try to lead them down the right path, but sometimes it's really hard because I was very headstrong and I thought I knew everything. And you were probably somewhat you know, you don't mass 35 units listening to everybody else. Cause if you
right.
did, your parents probably said, what are you doing? Go get a job, get education, forget that real estate stuff.
Right.
So I do try to help some investors right from the get go. I say, here's what's happening. You're over leveraging, you're moving too fast. You should think about this. And then whether they want to take that advice or not, that's on them.
And from someone like you with your experience, I mean, you're knowledgeable in every aspect of real estate. You've done it all. You know, you've been a realtor for
Yeah, on the residential side,
many
I'm
years.
pretty knowledgeable on that side.
You have a
for sure.
management company, you
Yeah.
flip properties, you've done partnerships with other investors, me included. So you can see this as a, you know, from all angles where I had a lot of great mentors getting into this business, and they helped me along the way. I didn't have anyone in particular that knew the whole business. So, you know, you were able to glean pieces and parcels from different people and put the pieces together. But
Right.
overall, the mentorship is very important. Anybody getting into real estate, I'd strongly recommend find a good mentor. You know, there are real estate agents, there are people that are involved in real estate management. Just find someone that you can ask questions, and maybe you can do a partnership with someone who's you know, got some experience in real estate. Can't go wrong.
I agree with you 100%. I kind of wish I did, and I wish I didn't have a mentor. I wouldn't be who I am today if anything changed. But
Right.
it would have made, I would have had a lot less sleepless nights, and I probably could have got from point A to where I'm at now in half the time. And here's the thing: you don't even know what a good mentor looks like when you're that young. You
It's
don't
true.
know. You're
That's true.
very impressionable, and someone who's just owns I say get a good mentor, but it's a lot harder than you think,
And
right?
you know, sometimes you get those mentors by using services that those mentors provide. I'll give you an example. You interviewed Mark Wolper not too long ago.
Mhm.
Great mentor. So if you borrow money from Ideal, you're going to get some mentorship from Mark, because he's going to lend you the money, but he's not just going to write a blank check. He's
Very
going to,
true.
you know, point.
He's kind of got a vested interest in making that investment work.
Yes. And he wants you to come back for another loan and
Right.
to do multiple deals. So he's going to give you good, sound advice. If you listen to him, you'll probably be, you know, in a better position.
Very true. You have to search, and you will find those people. But I also the caveat to that is don't expect something for nothing. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, use their services or pay them for their time. Or what can I do for you? You've been so helpful to me. What can I do for you?
Yes.
Because it's just nothing comes for free.
I'll tell
have
you,
to
I
do it.
had a great mentor, Spencer Hirschberg. You
Mhm.
remember Spencer?
Sure.
I just found out this week Spencer passed away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I bet it's been for me probably 18 years since I actually talked to that guy.
Oh, he was great.
He was a funny dude. I liked him.
The way we met him.
Spence was an attorney. He had a title company,
Yes.
and that was one of John's partners in the hard money
In the
arena.
hard money business. And the way that we partnered is Wade, Jackie White, myself, we all worked for the gas company. We were buying houses at that time. So Spencer was doing closings for Workingman Savings over on the north side. And at that time, we were all using Workingman's. So, you know, I would buy a house, cash, fix it up, and then refinance it with Workingman. So Spencer would come and we'd do the closing. And a month later, I was buying another one. So after about 4 or 5 of them, Spencer said, can I get in the game with you? And we had a meeting and we decided to start lending hard money. So we went around to local banks and we were able to acquire $4.5 million of warehouse lines of credit. And we took that money, we would lend that money to investors to purchase and renovate properties. We would give them enough money to purchase the property. We would handle the closing process, and then we would hold the repair money in escrow, and we do draws. We release draws, and my job was to go out and make sure that the work was being done right. So in essence, that business was a lending business, but it was also a mentorship, because we had to mentor these people to make sure our money stayed safe.
All right. So you got to see the investors that were successful at it, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, okay, I'm going to model that. And you got to see investors who are not successful at it and say, I'm not going to model that. So
Exactly.
you got to learn just from osmosis and being around these people and watching the successful ones and the not so successful ones.
And you know, Alex, over the course of years of doing this, after Spencer Wade and I no longer were in business together, I went and partnered with Tom Wagner. And one day I came into the office, I figured it out. And Tom said, "What did you figure out?" I said, "Tom, I figured out why some of our customers are failing and others are actually persevering." So Tom contacts his son. He said, "Christopher, come down. Johnny figured it out." So we sit in the conference room and they're all looking at me. They said, what did you figure out?" I said, "It dawned on me, dealing with hundreds of investors because we probably altogether, I've probably done 800 hard money loans over the years.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a boatload.
And that was an opportunity to see different personalities, different investors. Some were seasoned, some were just getting in. And people that were getting in, some of them did great. And other ones that were, seasoned weren't doing so well. And it dawned on me one day, the problem is not the investor, it's the contractors. The contractors were screwing the deals up. And here's why. The majority of the investors that were failing, when we would lend them money, we'd have to take the property back and then finish it and sell it ourselves. What I noticed was they had contractors that didn't have any money. These people were robbing Peter to pay Paul. Some of them would take a draw and pay their child support. Other ones would take a draw and buy a truck. If you could find a contractor who actually had some cash reserves, you probably will succeed. So I say that to everyone, be very careful who you use for your contracting and try to make sure that that individual has some lines of credit or has some cash reserves. That will make the difference between you succeeding and failing 90% of the time.
That is a great point. I never even literally thought about that, but that's a good question to ask.
Alex, I've never
Yeah.
been robbed from a contractor. I've never written a check and given it to a contractor and had the contractor disappear, not one time.
Right.
And I've done hundreds of renovations of units and properties.
Well, you know what to look for, and then you probably have a good core of people that you've done business with for a long time now.
Yes, absolutely. And so do you.
Yeah, no, I've never had anybody run off with a check, but I've made mistakes and given contractors too much money, and it's 100% my fault. I didn't check on the work.
Right.
I was so busy. I'm like, oh, I need another 10,000. Here you go. I got to get back to work. And then 25,000 later, I'm like, you only need $8 worth of work. So we lost 40 or 50,000, but that's a drop in the bucket over 30 years. But
Cost
yeah,
of doing business.
so if another nugget would be, if you don't find a contractor who has, all these lines of credit and cash in the bank, which they're hard to find, then at least just give them small increments, and then you have to manage them.
That's correct.
Until they build enough trust with you where you've done 4 or 5 jobs with them and they're okay.
Absolutely.
I can trust them. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. We are now at, let's say, 2007-ish. You're not doing as much hard money lending then?
Yeah, it started to slow down.
Slow
around 2007.
Well, the market did kind of crash, so
Yes.
maybe that had something to do with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So at that point, you're not working at the gas company. Your rental portfolio is almost sold. You're not doing the hard money. What did you morph into then at that point? How did you change to what you're doing now, or is that what happened?
Actually, what happened, I was doing less hard money loans. And at that time, I partnered with an out-of-town investor. His name is Jeff Vasishta. I consider him a very good friend, a brother.
I met Jeff.
You've met Jeff before.
Yeah, I think we might even manage a few properties for him.
Yes,
right now.
great guy out of New York, originally from England. His history is his parents are East Indian. So he's an East Indian guy who lives in New York with an English accent. Pretty interesting guy. But we partnered and we began to do bus tours. So Jeff, being, a New Yorker, he would go to New York meetings, real estate meetings, and he'd say, "Hey, I have a connection in Pittsburgh. And we have properties to sell in Pittsburgh. You can buy those properties cash and cash flow. So we began to do bus tours. Jeff would bring people down. Sometimes we'd have 10, 12, 15 people would come into Pittsburgh and spend the weekend with us, and we'd take them around, show them properties. We would sell the properties to them, and we would set them up with property management. The problem was the property management wasn't that good. So Jeff and I decided, hey, you know what? We need to keep this in-house to keep these people happy, because if they're happy, they'll tell their friends and their friends will buy houses. So it
Right.
worked out well. We did that for probably 4 or 5 years. We sold a ton of properties. And as you know, I had a pretty big rental management portfolio from the sale of those properties.
Mhm.
And I came to you and said, Alex, I need help.
It's a different business model, isn't it?
It really is.
There's a reason why there are not a lot of good property managers. It's because it is a very tough business. I can tell you the first 5 years, how many times I wanted to get out of it. And then probably the first 10. Now, after 22 years, 21, I think we finally have it sort of figured out, but
Yes.
it's been a long road, but it is a necessary part of that engine. I mean, you need that. You
is.
need, like, if you're out there selling the properties and you're out there trying to get more clients and get a good product out there, if you're missing that management side of it, even for a guy who just owns a couple, he could be really good at fixing, at finding the properties, at putting them under contract and getting them rent ready and finding a tenant. And then he just fails on the management side and
Yes.
everything falls apart. It's a tough biz. That's a tough part of it,
It
but
happens to a lot of investors.
absolutely does. Yeah. I just recently, since, when you started doing that, bringing out of state folks in, it's been gangbusters since then.
Yes.
Because we have, that you've seen it. We have so many out of state investors, out of the country investors. What happens is the agents or the people selling the projects or the portfolio, they talk a big game. Everything's all roses and
Yes.
rainbows. Then after about 2 years, the veil comes off and a lot of folks realize that, holy cow, I own a piece of garbage.
Right.
And now we're starting to see we're getting a lot of inquiries about, can you manage our properties for us? And 9 times, I don't know, 7 times out of 10, I can't, because I can't fix it.
Right.
It's so bad.
And if
I
the
can't-
investor is not willing to reinvest the money to bring the property up to scale,
Yeah. And
now,
it's not
if they are,
it's not
you
their
can do it.
fault, because they probably overpaid.
Right.
Now they're poorly managed, so they're even in more deplorable condition. Like I turned down a person today. They had like 10 properties over in Duquesne. Duquesne's a rough area.
Oh yeah.
They had 10 homes over there. I said, I can't help you, man. I can't put enough resources and time into that project and help you. It's literally going to take, it's a monumental task. I feel terrible.
Yeah.
But I can't do it because there's no money to be made for me. And to put my staff through that, because they have to
Right.
deal with cleaning that up, it's a tall order.
I'm happy to say that half of the people we sold property to from out of town sold their properties within 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
Kept them for a while. They sold them. Most of them made money on them, but the other half, the ones that held onto their properties,
Yeah.
they're cashing out now.
Yeah.
And they're cashing out nicely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They hit its timing is an important part of the market. The timing, you never know what the right time is going to be, but you're absolutely right. Like I sold a house to a really good client of mine, and he's been a management client too for a while. We just liquidated everything of his. I bought a house down on Lakewood for about $11,000. 1013
Is
Lakewood.
that Elliott?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right off of Lorenz. Not a bad house. Newer siding, newer windows. I had to go in at that time. I put about 15,000 into it, which was like 2004 or something. And it was a very nice house. I sold it to him for about 35. I made about 10 grand.
Nice.
Fast forward 12 to 15 years. I just sold it to him. I sold it for him for $130,000.
Wow.
An out-of-state investor bought it for $130,000. I wasn't his agent. I don't know who bought it. I was representing my client, and he way overpaid. And it's
Wow.
funny. I got a call from a guy who lives he lives in the United States. One of his friends bought it. And that was because he wanted me to help manage it because his manager wasn't doing a good job or whatever. So I was like, wow, it's full circle. So
It
what
is.
I'm saying is, I should have kept that property.
Absolutely.
I had 25 into it.
Wow.
What are you going to do?
And we've sold hundreds of properties we probably should have kept.
You can't keep them all. That's like
No.
like my story before. You have to sell something to keep the lights on.
You have to.
You know. Okay. How did you get? Here's my next question to you. Let's get into flipping, and then I want to get into what you're doing now along with flipping. 2017, after consulting with Alex Deacon, that's me.
Yes.
And Ian Hoover, I moved my real estate license, got licensed in 2013, which was so you could probably have access to the multi-list and find properties for your clients.
Correct.
Then you came over to Deacon Hoover, a great decision, he says here. Flipped and wholesaled over 200 properties in the last 30 years. But in the last 10 or 12, you have a partner now.
Yes.
How long have you guys been partners? And then, because you're doing like a nicer, higher end flips now. How long have you been a partner with this person? And then how many flips have you done since that time?
Well, actually, the guy I partnered with is James Otten.
Mhm.
Jim is a longtime real estate investor. Jim used to have his real estate license, but his wife now is licensed, and Jim put his license in escrow years ago. But I knew Jim from just doing deals with different people. I did deals with you. I did deals with Mark Fitchner. I did deals with Jim Otten through the years. You know, he called me and say, "Hey, John, I have a really good property. Do you have a buyer?" And we'd wholesale property. I'd line up a buyer, or I would call him and say, "Hey, Jim, I have a good property. Do you have a buyer?" And then he would line up a buyer. So we did that off and on for years. And I want to say somewhere in the 2010, maybe 2009 period, he calls me and he says, "John, hey, I have a property over in Swiss Elm Park that I put under agreement and I want to flip it." And he said, "Do you want to flip it with me?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, I have a lender who's going to lend the money." And I'm thinking, well, what do you need me for? If you have the lender and you have the property. And I asked him, I said, he said, "We work well together." He said, "Maybe this will open the door and maybe we can do some more transactions." So, I mean, it was a great opportunity for me to come in. He didn't need me. And we flipped the property and we split the profits down the middle, made a nice profit. And we did another one and another one and another one. And we've done well over 100 over the course of probably 12 years. You know, we're averaging anywhere from, 8 to 15 a year.
Mhm.
And we've made money on most of them.
Yeah.
You know, we've had a few dogs in there,
You always
as you
do,
always
yeah.
do.
I've
And
seen some of his product too. It's very good.
very good.
Thought out, colors are on point. Just a nice product.
Yes. When you find people you can trust, trust is the key. It makes things much easier. You know, the Bible says one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. That's true. That principle works. When I was flipping a house here or there, it was fine. You know, make some extra money here and there. But when I partnered with Jim, it seems like our numbers went up exponentially because you
Right.
have two people working together, putting our minds together and filling in
Yeah.
the blanks.
Just the integration of both your ideas, and when you work well together, sometimes
Yes.
it can 1 and 1 equals
Zero.
-2.
Right.
Yeah, that's when you really started in 2010-ish, 2009, right? That's when you really started to focus on
On the
just
flips.
just flipping, and
Yeah.
and typically you're buying in better areas. The stuff you're selling is like typically a better school district or like a
Yes.
better part of the city of Pittsburgh. And nothing wrong with I've done plenty of low end flips and done
Sure.
quite well.
Oh,
In fact, I mean, we do them all the time. Sometimes there's like a $20,000, even a $15,000 margin on a $50,000 house that's just as profitable and easy to do on. You've probably done $200,000 and $300,000 houses where you've walked away with 15,000
Yes.
You know?
Or less.
or less.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your best flip, if you don't mind sharing, and how much did you make?
My very best flip individually without my partner, Jim,
Yeah.
was a property over in Finley Township.
Oh, that's the one I listed. And
That's the
sold.
one you sold for
I
me.
made 60,000 with my agent, Alex Deacon. I remember
Yes.
that house too. That was
Yes.
a neat house. You know, they tore down that garage since then because you live right there.
Yeah, it wasn't a garage. It was actually a store.
Right.
Yeah, it was a store. I think it was an ice cream shop or something.
They tore that down after they bought it
And built a
there's
garage.
nice garage there now. That was a neat house.
And that was a cash buyer.
Was it really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So no
gosh.
appraisal, no hoops to jump through.
Man, that's
It
been
was
a
a
while,
quick,
huh?
clean closing.
Was that before you? No, you were licensed then. No, were you licensed then?
I was licensed, but I was with Mace. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
so I was with you, but I was with Mace,
Gosh,
so I couldn't list
That had to be
properties.
7-8 years ago.
Yeah,
Man.
and to be honest with you, when you and Ian and I had a meeting, you guys summoned me to a meeting. It wasn't a meeting I set up. You guys summoned me. Ian contacted me and said, "Hey, Alex and I would like to sit down with you and talk." So I came to the meeting and you said, "John, it's time for you to move your real estate license from Mace because Mace doesn't enable you to use your license to list properties." And you said, "You know, you're wasting your talents." And I'll never forget that. And you said, "I think you can make a lot more money by moving your license
And stop managing property.
and stop managing
Because
properties."
John was managing, I don't know, maybe 100 units at one time.
Yeah, it was more than
And-
that, maybe 120.
And it's, man, I can't tell you how many times that I've had to tell agents who want to start managing. I said, think it through. And this is why. And I'll give them a 5-minute dissertation on why you don't want to manage and why you should focus on the more profitable side of things. Now, with that being said, management can be very lucrative, but it just, the learning curve, getting over that hump is massive, you know?
Yes.
So when you came to the realization that I think you started shrinking your management portfolio, we were helping you manage, and now we just took over whatever you had left. And since then, you flourished with the flips.
Flourished. And also with my real estate license with listings, because that enabled me to list some of my own properties. I was still listing properties with other agents
Right.
at the time, which made no sense. I knew
Yeah.
it made no sense, but
Yeah.
I didn't think I had the time to learn the listing process because I knew there was going to be a learning
Sure.
curve.
Well, just on that house, if I remember correctly, it was maybe around 200,000.
Yes.
Right. So you probably paid me 2.5% or maybe 2%. So $4,000 or $5,000.
Right.
So multiply that times 100 listings.
Yes.
And it does add up.
It does.
It does add up.
Since then, I could tell you, you probably already know this, I've probably averaged anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year on realtor fees.
Right. That you would have paid someone like myself. Now,
Yes,
with that being said, if you have a good agent and that agent's bringing you deals,
that's a different story.
yeah, you should reward them for listening because they're making money on the front end, right?
Right.
And then say, look, I'm going to list this with you, but you got to give me a little bit of a discount on the commissions.
That's
'cause
exactly.
It's a reciprocating, agreement.
If you don't do that, then what happens, that agent will take that property to someone else who will do that.
Right.
So think to make that extra $3,000 a flip, you're going to lose 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 7 deals a year. Doesn't make sense.
Okay. So you've done a ton of flips. I've seen your product. The product is very good.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what's the nightmare flip and how much did you lose and what did you do wrong with that one?
The worst one that I've ever done, well, there were two. One was probably 2011. I was just getting my feet wet with flipping again, and I greatly underestimated the cost of the renovation of a property over in Moon Township.
Really? I've never done that.
You've never done that,
Oh,
huh?
I think I know what house this is too, but Guy listed that too.
Did you?
I think so. That's the one that had the steep driveway and the garage around the back.
Yes.
And your cousin, what's your cousin's name?
Tony.
Tony did the work over. He
Yes.
did a nice job.
Very good. Always does.
Yeah, I do remember that. So, okay, you underestimated the cost of renovation.
Well, I hadn't been doing many flips during that period of time. So I went into it with the mindset of 2005 and greatly underestimated the difficulty of the renovation and the cost. And of course, the building inspector got involved and
Oh
made
boy.
us do some extra stuff. And at the end of the day, I actually partnered with my out of town partner, Jeff Assistia, on that deal. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, we probably lost about 35,000. Yeah.
That's a pretty good loss.
Yeah. That's the biggest loss
Yeah, that's a nice one.
that I've ever
That
endured.
hurts.
Yeah.
Okay. So there you go. Every deal is not going to be a winner.
No.
Don't let what I don't want to see happen with, especially with new investors, because is start a deal like with a deal.
Well,
like that,
that'll end your
'cause
career.
it does. And
Yeah.
you have a bad taste in your mouth, and maybe you just can't even recover from it. You
Yeah.
know? Now, John, at some point, he's a man of God. And at some point, when did you like, how did that start? Like, were you in a religious family? How did that morph into now you're an ordained pastor or minister, right?
Yes. Grew up in a household with parents that believed in the Lord. My father was a really good man, but an alcoholic. So I grew up with an alcoholic father who struggled with alcohol. But in the mid-70s, he actually came to Christ, and I got the opportunity to see what God could do with a person's life. And I saw him change and become a better man. And I have to say, I had the greatest parents in the history of the planet. I mean,
Wow.
they were just awesome. My dad was an extrovert. I mean, if you walk down the street with him, he would just stop and talk to people. I mean, very outgoing. My mom was more introverted and quiet, but just the best parents, loving, kind parents. Um, and anything that's good that's happened to me in my life, I attribute it to them and to God.
Your
Thankful.
parents still with us?
No, they've both gone home to be with the Lord.
But that's amazing that you can. I'm sure your parents are looking down, very proud.
I hope so.
Dude, that's literally. I'm a parent of 3 daughters, and that is better than any gift. Just the words that you did good and you're the best. That's deep.
Coming from your kids.
Yeah, I'm going to tear up here a little bit here. So it's even if you don't have children, it's irrelevant. Just people, when people tell you that how much you've changed my life and how much I've looked up to you and you're a role model, can be uplifting as hell.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So at what point did you decide to go down that path though?
Well, throughout my life, in and out of church, and pretty disillusioned with the church, with the structured church. I found a little church in the basement of a church, and the pastor really taught from the Bible, and I found that stimulating, and I joined that church and was there for years, and that's where I was actually ordained. And the ministry I'm involved in is completely nonprofit. When I say nonprofit, that means that I don't make a profit. It's all internet based. It's free. And, that's my conviction. I don't visit that conviction on other people. But, for me, it's very fulfilling. And if you don't mind me giving a plug, Finalword.info. And
Okay.
if you go to Finalword.info, there's a lot of information about the end of days. My ministry is a prophetic ministry. So it's a ministry that's geared toward teaching people what they can expect to endure or see leading to the second coming of Christ, which I believe could be in our lifetime. So that ministry has well over 100 podcasts with different teachings. It has a series called Gospel 101, which is a series of 24 teachings, which breaks down the gospel, exactly what it is, in the words that the Apostle Paul used in the 3rd and 8th chapter of the book of Romans. And it breaks down those words in a way that people who believe in Jesus Christ can understand the gospel better.
You're passionate about that. So
Very much.
That comes through when you're talking about
More so than the real estate. And
Well,
I'm very passionate about my real estate.
Yeah, no, absolutely you are. Now you're flipping, you're a man of God. You have your passion with trying to spread that word around. And you're also starting to reaccumulate rental properties because you see the value in that side of things.
Absolutely.
So right now you currently own 7, 4 are are rentals?
It's 7 properties altogether. 4 are rentals. I have a couple more rentals under agreement that I'm going to be purchasing. 2 that my wife and I closed on last month are going to be Airbnbs. So we're
Okay.
working on that and dipping our toes in the Airbnb waters.
Right.
So we're looking forward to that.
And do you have a long-term vision for your future? Like, what does that look like? 5 years, 10 years?
You know,
What are-
I'm
what-
58 years old, and I look to continue in real estate. And if anything, if I find myself backing down a bit, in my 60s, I'll probably lean a little heavier on using my real estate license. If it gets to the point where, handling rehabs and everything, becomes too much. I don't see that happening. I think I'm in it for life, because I enjoy it so much. But if I was going to back away from anything, I'd probably back away from that and focus more on using my license, because I think that the experience I have over the last 30 years could help a lot of investors and a lot of people who are buying property.
How do you find the properties? We didn't even talk about that. Like, where are you finding your deals? If you would like to share that.
Well, for years, Jim and I focused on mailings. We did tons of postcard mailings, and that was very effective for us. Well, now there's a deluge of people doing that, and it's not as effective as it used to be. So we do a little bit of everything. Word of mouth always gets me a few properties a year. Of course, we still buy properties from the multi-list. The last 2 that I purchased were from the multi-list. Believe it or not, some of the investors who we sold properties to, out-of-town investors, I've bought some of their properties.
Okay.
A little bit of everything. I buy properties from local wholesalers.
Right.
So, a little bit of everything.
We're doing mailers, we're doing cold calling. The mailers have slid because there are just a plethora of wholesalers and mailings going out.
Too many.
It's incredible. I bought some from the multi-list. I bought some from wholesalers recently. We just did a really nice one we bought from a wholesaler. Top 5 things that an investor should focus on when flipping homes. Doesn't even have to be 5. Flipping or even buying and selling real estate. And we talked about one is getting a mentor, but
Can you read what
Yeah,
I
sure.
actually pinned?
Understanding how to accurately figure out ARVs, which is after repair value,
Yes.
and probably add in there, oh, you did accurately figuring out the true cost of repairs.
Those are the 2 most important things. If you cannot figure those 2 things out, you will fail. Figuring out an ARV of a property is paramount. Now, if you're a new investor getting into the business, you can partner with people who can help you with that. If Alex Deacon is your real estate agent, then you have that side of it covered. He's going to be able to look at that property and give you an accurate ballpark idea what that property will sell for if you do a good job.
I got to interrupt you. That is such an awesome idea. Is a partner, like if you have a deal, bring it to me, bring it to John.
Yes.
And say, John, half is yours. I brought the deal. Show me what to do. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's free tuition is what that is. But so the ARV, super important. And then, like you said, the cost to do the rehab, because
That's the
costs
hard
have
part.
skyrocketed.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I am over budget on every flip
Everyone,
that I do.
everybody is.
No matter what.
Yeah.
You've done 200 flips. Are you ever under budget?
Never.
I think because you and I and most investors we're so positive and optimistic, and we want to succeed so bad that we kind of maybe in the back of our mind keep those costs down so we can show a profit at the end of I don't know.
And the other thing is, it's the unknowns. So if you don't put a miscellaneous fee in there, and the bigger the rehab, the bigger the miscellaneous fee it should be.
Right.
If you're doing a $50,000 rehab, a $50,000 rehab today is what a $25,000 rehab was in 2004. So if you're doing a $50,000 rehab, if you iron out your numbers and your estimates, you need to probably throw 15 to 20% on top of that if you want to be accurate about what it's really going to cost you, because you're never going to anticipate every single repair needed at a property.
You would recommend every line item is accounted for, throw another 10 to 15% on that.
Easy. I'd say 15 to 20, depending on the property, how old it is. The older the property, the higher the number.
Right.
And if you're doing a major rehab, I'd say anything over 125 is major. You probably need to put 25% on top of it.
I just did one.
Item.
I just did one. I had estimated 80. It ended up 120.
Yes, that's how it
and
is.
we lost about $5,000. I did all that work. It was terrible, but I should have known better, man. I do know better. Right?
But you know what? When you have those deals that you lose money on, it makes it that much sweeter when you go to the closing and you get all that money back on the next deal.
Certainly does.
You know,
I was so happy to see that go away. Finding a good, trustworthy contractor. We did talk about that. And you, in parentheses, a contractor who has good cash reserves. Great tip. I've never even thought about that. What do? You just ask the contractor, hey, do you got any cash reserves? If they start doing like, then they probably don't.
Right. And you know, it took a while for me to figure that out because, you know, I was in the mindset that the contractor that failed didn't have the skill set to finish the project. But that's not the case. Most contractors who are out there working you can tell if a contractor doesn't know what they're doing.
Contractors get a bad rap. Yeah. They do. And I say this all the time. It's just as much your fault as theirs. You have to do your due diligence.
Yes.
And most contractors, people run contractors around ragged. They want estimate after estimate. They screw them out of money. It's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So just do your due diligence and then build that trust with a good contractor.
And, you know, one of the things, you know, my philosophy is it has to be a win-win for everybody. Some people look for the cheapest estimate they can get. I don't want the cheapest estimate.
Yeah.
You know, when a contractor gives me an estimate, I'm going to look at it and say, hey, this contractor is not going to make any money. This estimate's too low. And I'm not going to give them the job because it's not going to work out for me or for them.
That's the catch-22. Like an average newbie doesn't know they're just looking at the bottom line. They don't know any better. So it is tough.
It is.
A good example, I'm doing a porch right now that's it completely needs redone. It's a rental I've had for a while and it's going to cost me $6,000. I got two estimates, 4,500 and 6. I'm going with the 6 because I know that guy. I know he's going to do a good job, and I know enough that I know to spend the money.
Makes sense.
You know, penny wise and pound foolish sometimes will get you into trouble.
Right.
Finding a good real estate agent who understands investment property. Consider becoming a realtor. Well, you've kind of lived that, and now you are a realtor.
And honestly, Alex, if I had to do anything over again, I would have got my license in the 90s. I should have been sitting next to you instead of standing in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Because think about how much money I could have made with the license, even if I wasn't aggressive over the course of that 15 years.
That's what happened to me. I bought 2 properties and I said, man, I'm just going to get my license. This is silly.
Yeah.
So I got my license. After the 3rd property, I got my license. My real estate agent was probably not the happiest with me because she was very good. She did a nice job. But I said, man, I got to get my license. This is silly. It
was a good move.
Yeah. The last one, identifying let me back up. So you get your license, but you could still work with agents. Like I ask agents all the time, listen, if you bring me a deal, you get all the commission.
Yes.
If it's your listing or you find a deal, you get all the commission.
Absolutely.
And you can list it and sell it for me. As long as there's enough margin on it, I'll pay you whatever you want.
I have a deal closing tomorrow and I'm represented by an agent.
Yeah. 100%. So agents are your friends.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the last one you had was identifying your own strengths and weaknesses and finding ways to fill in the blanks. I think that's so important just in life in general, but looking in the mirror, I call it the mirror test. Look in the mirror and say, what are you really lacking?
Yes.
And stop trying to, fill that, just take a real close look, and
because at some point, if you haven't filled it, you can't fill it and you won't fill it. But there are other people out here who can fill it.
Right.
And if you bring something to the table that they need, then they're happy to fill in that blank.
Because you're your strengths are their weaknesses and vice versa.
I know investors who can't do paperwork. they just won't do paperwork. So if you find someone like that who's a good investor, smart, resourceful, then you do the paperwork for them, and maybe you can partner up and be successful.
I know a couple partners. I won't mention their names, but they are diametrically opposite. And one is very good at finding properties.
Mhm.
You know who I'm talking
Of
about.
course I do.
Bounces off the walls.
Yes.
Very smart. Great networker. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Not good at paperwork. Not good at details. Not good at following through.
Yes.
His partner,
Very good.
opposite. Like
Yes.
he's a bean counter.
Yes.
And they work well together.
Very well.
So find yourself a good partner. I always tell people that when you pick a partner, find someone who's good at what you're not good at. And so if they need to bring money to the table, knowledge,
Yes.
the deal itself, some contracting skills, something that if you guys are both good at the same thing, it's not gonna be as powerful. I
Right.
think. John, this was an awesome podcast. I know everything we talked about, our viewers can take something from it and learn a ton. And I'm hoping that they do, because that's why I like doing this. It's good for content for me to get out there, but just to have this available to, like, you have YouTube and the internet now. We didn't have that. We just had to learn. Like, did you take a course or something? How did that happen? I skipped over that.
The first course I ever took before I ever bought a piece of real estate, I was in the gym. Do you remember God's Gym?
No.
There
Where was that at?
It was over in Mount Oliver.
No, I don't.
And the gentleman is in the ministry, and he opened up a gym, and he just left it open. So you could go in and work out anytime you want.
God's Gym.
It's God's Gym.
You're gonna mess with it.
Yeah, there was no charge or anything. And the guy's name was Kurt. And I was in there working out one day, and he started talking to me. He said, "John, you ought to get into real estate." I said, "Yeah, I've always thought about it." He said, "Well, I've got a set of tapes. I'll lend them to you."
Tapes.
So he gives me these tapes, and they were from the late 80s. The tapes were done by Ed Beckley, and he's still on there's still stuff.
That's a name
from
I
him
don't
on the
remember.
internet.
I remember Carlton Sheets. Do you
Carlton
remember?
Sheets. I did his much later, but Ed Beckley was very thorough, and I learned real estate from listening to these tapes. And actually, I had asked Kurt after I finished the tapes. I said, "Hey, my cousin wants to listen to these tapes." He said, "Oh yeah, go ahead." I gave them to my cousin. He lost them. So I felt bad about it. So I gave Kurt the money that
Well,
he paid
now
for the
you
tapes
can-
back.
It's out at your fingertips.
Everything's there.
So there's no reason why you can't get educated on it. And then sifting and sorting through that information is important. Finding a good mentor, everything we talked about. There's no reason why you can't get into real estate and do a couple deals or do hundreds and thousands of deals.
And
The sky's the limit.
The podcasts you do are Pittsburgh specific.
Yes.
Everybody wants to sell you on the idea that you can generalize real estate, that you can, go buy a set of tapes or a boot camp, and someone from California can teach you how to do real estate. There's truth to that.
There's truth to that.
They can fill in some blanks. They can
Right.
motivate you.
Right.
But if you want to really know what you need to do in your region, you need to plug in with people from your
No
region.
doubt. Buy anything outside of Pittsburgh. I really don't, because I'm afraid. And
Yeah.
I know a lot about real estate. So, ultimately when we move, I want to move to a warmer climate. I really want to get to know that market and start buying there. But
Absolutely.
I won't buy anything.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know enough. I know what I don't know. I know my strengths and my weaknesses. And my
Right.
weaknesses are I don't know other markets. John, thank you. And one more time, where can they find you for your ministry?
Finalword.info.
Okay. And I appreciate your time, buddy.
Thank you, Alex. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.